Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Danisha Keating Show. I am super excited to have the two people of the California Underground podcast. They are with me. I have Camille and Phil with me. They are people I look up to on the political realm. When they start to share stuff, I know I'm listening. We are going to be having a kitchen table conversation where we're going to actually ask questions to understand. Remember, the rules is that we can't yell at each other, scream at each other, or talk over each other. We are on an app that sometimes we can't hear the other person, but this is where we're all going to be tentative and try to listen and to hear what the other person has to say. And we're inviting you guys to be the fly on the wall to hear what this conversation looks like, especially when it comes to politics and California politics specifically. I feel like California is kind of struggling a little bit. So we want to invite you guys to be that fly on the wall to hear how we would have this conversation and navigate it for yourself in the future. So, Phil and Camille, if you guys want to introduce yourself, I just realized your names kind of rhyme. That's pretty cool. So, if you guys want to introduce yourself, what you guys do, and we'll just go from there.
Phil, you start.
Uh, yeah. My name's Phil. I started the California Underground podcast back in 2018.
Oh,
Um, Mostly because I didn't think there was a space for people to talk about California politics like in depth. And, there's so many podcasts that are focused on national politics. Everybody wants to talk about that. But there's so much to talk about here in California.
yes.
And I was mostly motivated because and it's part of the reason why it's called the California Underground is because you would start to talk to people in California and it'd be like at the water cooler getting a cup of coffee, be like, oh, so and all those, taxes, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, are you on sort of the same wavelength as me? And then it sort of became this like coded language of like, yeah, we're on the same like that, we're all thinking about it, because California is this weird place where I think they assume 100% of us are like Bay Area leftists who just
Mm-hmm.
want complete like socialism and statism.
Right.
So then I just started. I was like, you know what? Let's create this space for people to come and talk and engage. And we've had a lot of great people on, incredible guests, lots of people from the state legislature. So governors or gubernatorial candidates. We haven't had a governor on yet. Maybe one day we'll have a governor on. We've asked Newsom. He doesn't want to come on. Um,
I asked him
but
to.
yeah, it's been quite a ride. So that's sort of the podcast in a nutshell.
I love that. Go ahead, Camille.
I'm Camille, and I am the co-host of the California Underground podcast, which I also was very. Phil and I met through politics, but I was also very into local politics versus national. On a national level, I feel like I get overwhelmed, but talk about city, county, statewide issues all day long, and that kind of like amps me up. And so we realized we had that in common, and I joined the California Underground podcast at the end of 2022, I believe. So it's been about 2.5 years, and we do love to research candidates. We not that we love to take people down, but we certainly love when we get to expose fraudulent people who aren't who they say they are, who they're trying to lead you to believe. And we do try to break down exactly how we found this out, with facts, with public information, with information that people can find for themselves. That's a big deal to us. California is it it's a beautiful state. It's got a lot of crazy things going on. I have 4 kids and I've always homeschooled all of them. My oldest graduated, my second is about to graduate. But even though I live in a actually really great area, I just kind of was like, I don't know. I see the writing on the wall and I'm just not going to put my kids in that. And so we've always homeschooled. So when COVID hit, we were like, nothing changes for us. We're just going to keep on going, keep doing what we're doing. And so here we are. Thank you so much for having us on, by the way. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I started following California Underground during 2020, and I literally felt what you said, Phil, where it's like, we don't talk about it.
Mhm.
I was like, people are going to know I'm following this, and then I'm going to get in trouble, because it really did feel like some of the conversations you were happening, it was like, we cannot talk about this in public.
Right.
I've told my sister yesterday, where we were just talking, and I'm like, there's certain people in our family that I will not have a conversation on politics for, because even when you show them the truth, They yell, they scream, and it's just not worth having a conversation. And now I'm finding that to be with just people in general. It is an overwhelming thing. And I recently loved the one that you guys did with the whole exposing a particular person, you know, house and habit. I was following her for a really long time and was really gaining a lot of stuff, and then starting to see the holes in some of her arguments. And not just that, but just in who she was as a person and how she was taking advantage of people. And it was very shocking to me because it was not what was being portrayed out there. But then you start to see that with your guys' episodes with policies and with people. And I've never felt like it was in a way of just like, I just want to take this person down, which is what I see from a lot of people out there, is where they're like, I just want to destroy this person because it's fun for me. You guys are doing it where it's like, hey, this person's actually not saying really the truth. They're not saying who they really are, and they're lying behind a facade just to get you to follow them, to pay for something, or to vote for them. So in California, we see that a lot right now with Newsom. He's kind of done this
Mhm.
180 where he's like, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to be this great person.
Who is
Uh,
he?
I'm like, oh, cute. I call him Noodles because I don't know who I heard that from, but I heard a couple people on social media calling him Noodles after the fires. I think in like 2020 or 2021, there was a group of fires that happened, and they were just like, he has really small arms, and they started calling him Noodles, and it stuck. But he is also the same governor who, while we were on lockdown, was sitting in a restaurant, and a fancy one at that. No masks, no social distancing. His kids were still in private school. So when you guys started to expose some of that stuff, how does that play on what's happening today as he is going as a national, trying to be the person who's going to be a president in the future? How would you guys say that? Like, how do we start looking up that information when some of it's blocked online?
Um, well, first, I want to take credit for the noodles thing. That
Was that you?
that was
I'm
me
pretty
along. That
sure it
was
was
around
you.
2020 when he got. I saw an image of him on Twitter, and he was like, "Oh, make sure to get your flu shots right around COVID."
Yes.
And he took his shirt off, and I was like, "Whoa, he has tiny little arms." They were like little
I have
tiny
tiny
arms.
arms.
So
It
ever since
it
then,
literally looked like it was just like this noodle. But then when he was at the fires, he was like this, and I think you might have posted something about the jacket he was wearing, and you're like, yeah, it still has noodle arms. I
yeah,
was like, that's pretty
it's stuck. So I just started calling him Governor Noodles.
it's
Well,
great.
when it comes to Gavin Newsom, the good thing about him is that he's such a huge public figure that people are quick to like call out his hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And people know it's not a secret. It's not some like deep secret about his desire to run for president. So I think
Oh
people
yeah.
are constantly they're like constantly looking at like what he's saying. They know this next term is probably going to be the time he runs. So
Mm,
every time he says something, people are automatically going back through his history and finding it for you. So I think there's
right.
plenty of information
Yeah.
on Gavin Newsom. It really comes down to other candidates who I think what you're bringing up about people who put themselves out there and are not who they say they are. And I mean, that's how Camille and I met. Was we took, I'm not saying took down, but I would say we kind of shone a light on Major Williams, who was a big um, he was a big grassroots guy
Yeah.
back at the time, and it was around the recall time, and he had said something on social media, and he sort of challenged me, I guess, in the comment section about like, look up, like, if you think I'm lying, look up my financials. And I said, okay, challenge accepted. So I went to the Secretary of State website,
Done.
which is one resource. That's a great resource for your listeners to always check out, is the Secretary of State website. You can find
Mm,
all of the donations and all that stuff there. But there's another resource we can talk about in a little bit that I think is even better. And I went through it and I was like, look, you're spending money on this. You're spending money on this. He was staying at the Lido house, which was like $700 a night. And I'm like, you're running for governor and you're staying at these lavish places and using limo services and all that stuff. And all I did was put the video out and just say, like, here's these expenses. I didn't say they were fraudulent. I didn't say he committed a crime. I didn't say any of that. Basically, I was just showing a lot of listeners, hey, this is
yeah.
where you can find it. This is the information. You do what you want with it. And that sort
Yeah.
of snowballed into people being like, whoa, wait a second, where are we spending this money? Or where is he spending his money? But
Mm,
back to Gavin Newsom, I think you can always look at which side his, what's the saying? You can always look on which side your bread is buttered or whatever, your side of the roll,
oh
or
yeah,
something like that.
that's
Whenever
true.
there's a politician, Gavin Newsom is definitely guilty of this, as are most California politicians. Whenever they do something, you kind of scratch your head and you're like, huh, that's interesting. Why would you do that?
Right.
One of my favorite things is to go to this site called followthemoney.org, and you can
Mm,
put in companies or individuals, and it is an enormous database where it has all these different individuals as candidates, contributors, PACs, all of this stuff. And you can go there and you can literally look it up and be like, who did you donate money to? And you can see like automatically you'll go, oh, well, the Western Petroleum Association donated to so and so, and that's why all of a sudden you back this bill. That's one way like you can stay on top of really seeing behind the scenes where people are getting their influence from. 9 times out of 10, if you're wondering why people make decisions, California Teachers Association is usually behind all of it. But that's usually where you can start looking. Is there's a lot of great resources out there
yeah.
to stay on top of what people are doing and why they're doing it.
I think what's wild too is like when at first, like when I think donation money, I think like $250. Like I'm like, because that's what I can donate. But these are like $250,000, $300,000, millions of dollars pouring into this campaign, and it's like, oh, I'm going to make California great again, or I'm going to do this and make California functional. With was it Major Williams is his name?
Mm-hmm.
With him, why is it, I want someone to understand this, like why is it a problem when he's staying somewhere for $750 a night? what where was this money? Was this his campaign money? Was this supposed to be like California money? Why is this a problem? Because I think some people don't understand why this is such a big deal.
Uh, I mean, personally, for me, I hate seeing people get taken advantage of, and I hate people being uh, defrauded out of their hard-earned money, whether that is the government or politicians who are running for the government. And that cuts across both aisles. And I think we've probably been a little bit harder on Republicans because there are a lot of Republicans who come with big promises of we're going to fix this, we're going to fix that, and then we can discuss that later about like how we look at these candidates, because we have a lot of candidates who will approach us about,
Yeah.
hey, can we come on your podcast? And we have to do our research. Camille usually does most all the research, and we'll like once we get an email from a candidate, a couple minutes later I'm getting texts of like, okay, this is the district, this is this is this, and like Camille gives me the whole rundown. um but I guess the issue I have is it wasn't like he was running with like millions and millions of dollars and he could afford to stay at a nice hotel. He was running, I think at that point he raised like $300,000, and people were giving a lot of their money over to him. And when you're running a small budget campaign, you should be focusing on the stuff that would enhance your campaign: mailers, text messages, marketing, stuff like that. You should be a really tightly run, smart campaign. And it just seemed like a lot of stuff was being spent on these expenses that you kind of scratch your head at. And I don't think people who are contributing money, believing he was this big grassroots phenomenon up and coming, would
Right.
like to know that their hard earned dollars to support this guy are going to lavish hotels or limo services or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's my personal problem is when you lift the hood of a lot of these politicians. There's another
Right.
one, for example, Omar Navarro. I don't want to pat
Yeah.
ourselves on the back, but we had exposed Omar Navarro for all of his stuff 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
Hmm.
He's now like facing federal charges for those things. Like
Oh
we
wow.
we saw what he was doing, and we looked it up, and we were like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. Why are you using campaign money to go grocery shopping? Or like it was just all these weird expenses, and he was
Right.
promising to take down Maxine Waters. He was like, I'm gonna take down Maxine Waters. And we're like, are you gonna take down Maxine Waters? That district's like 85% Democrat. So
Yeah. That's wild. Camille, go ahead.
Yeah. It's normal to see on someone's, like, especially for a gubernatorial candidate, they obviously have to travel the state of California. They need to get their name out there. They need to talk to the people. They need to go, county to county and all that. And so you're going to see travel expenses, and that's absolutely normal. Consultants are normal. Even lawyers, they often have legal fees. Accountants, because there's a lot of rules and regulations that goes into your campaign financials, and you don't want to get in trouble for that. So those are very normal fees. If you know that they're traveling from, like, if the candidate lives in San Diego and they need to be in Sacramento, of course they're going to have a hotel, of course they're going to have a flight. Those are going to be on campaign finances, and those are absolutely normal. Those are expected. And then they have to eat when they're there. And so, like, some grocery shopping is normal to an extent, or even restaurants. You're traveling with staff. You have to eat. Perhaps you're hosting a dinner party with other candidates or other politicians or stuff. So that is normal. I want to say that's normal. But when you see that someone has a smaller financial campaign and most of their expenses are spent in one area and on very nice things, then that's when you kind of start to question, is this person really traveling the state trying to get their name out there, or are they just having fun on donations? So when we say campaign financials, that is quite literally donations coming from people like you and I. And we can say, oh, I like this candidate, I believe in what they're saying, and I hope they go further, and so I'm going to donate so that hopefully they can advertise, can get their mailers out there and all that. And so that's what we do expect to see. Of course, they're going to have staff. Any campaign can be, depending on who the person is, their campaign may be much larger staff. It might be smaller. Those kind of expenses are normal. But, like, back to Omar Navarro, he was running for Congress. This is not a national level candidate. It's not even a statewide candidate. It's for one specific district. And so when we were seeing all kinds of money being spent out of the state, then we start to call that into question. Because going to DC is quite normal for congressional candidates, but why are you in Las Vegas every other weekend eating at these really expensive sushi bars? What does that have to do with your district back home and beating somebody like Maxine Waters? Like, you've got to talk to your people there, because only your people there can vote for you. Certainly raising funds is important. And there are, like, I know he mentioned the Lido Hotel, which is Orange County, California. Politicians come here all the time to Orange County because there is a lot of money here. They can raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that can be normal to an extent too. So certainly a here and there fundraiser, you expect to see that. But when you're quite literally in Vegas every weekend eating sushi, that's questionable. You wonder.
Yeah. It makes you kind of go like, okay, are you rubbing elbows with your friends? Or are you
Right.
here
Right.
to help us? So when
Another birthday party.
another birthday party, well, and then you see it on their social media. It's kind of wild that they just, like, and I think, like, going to Noodles for a little bit, that was such a shocker to us. It wasn't a shocker when we saw him at the laundry restaurant, where he was just during COVID, middle of lockdowns. His kids are still going to school, and all of us were being told, like, don't go out, you can't do this, you have to social distance, your kids can't go to school. And it was just like, okay, you just got a really fancy dinner, like hundreds of dollars worth for a plate. Your kids are fine in their schooling, but we are struggling to get normal things, and there's nothing being done for us. And I think that was kind of eye-opening to me, that, like, I already didn't like the guy, and it was just something about him that I was like, I can't put my finger on it. And then I was like, oh, you're one of those guys where it's just like, I'm going to take California money, and I'm going to take a bunch of politicians out and friends out, and we're going to go sit over here. And I know who paid that bill. Like, we did. Like, we paid for that, because he didn't let people grab their own bills. But it is one of those things that, like, now he's like doing this whole flip. It's like, we've had a homelessness crisis for so long. I mean, I've born and raised in California. I think both of you as well. You guys have been here for a long time. That homelessness has always been a big deal, and it's just, we're throwing billions of dollars at it, and it's not even getting better. And he just was like, okay, everybody clean it up. And I'm like, oh, that's all it took? That was it. And he just never did that before. And that was wild to me because I was like thinking in my head what we're taught at a very young age. If you start to go into, I was more, I'm going to be honest, I was more middle leaning, more towards Democrat than Republican when I was in high school. And a lot of the thing was like the government can save you, government assistance help is there to help you. You know, you're here to be helped, and we're here to fight in your corner, and that you believe that for a split second until you're like, oh, you're not actually here for me, you're here to keep me on this path. Um but I remember someone just being like, you know, tune in, to put your ear to the ground and tune in to what's happening. But homelessness issues has always been an issue, and it just took a snap of the finger. I thought it was going to take years to fix. I've been told it was going to take years to fix, and it's not. And then you guys have exposed a couple things where it's like, hey, the fires that recently happened, and we can talk about that for a second. Is, you know, they're like, oh, it's going to take years for people to be able to rebuild, and it's like, well, what's the reason behind that? And it's like, well, there was something that Newsom signed to make that area like a condo area. And I was just like, are you joking me? Like, I was so upset about it. So it was like, oh, don't clean up the area, don't prevent the fires. Then you take care of mass exodus of a lot of people and you don't have to pay them a dime. And that was kind of some of the things that I've seen come from that conversation. So when it comes to like any of that, do you guys have anything like, how did, when you guys have talked about that stuff, what was some of the surprising things that you found as you're digging into like politics or to politicians or into the, if like real state issues like the fires?
Um, well, going back to the Noodles dinner at the French Laundry, this might be a good sort of example of how we put our detective hats on
Yeah.
and go down that road. Um, Now, obviously, this was before the advent of like AI was available for everyone, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
old school was you had to go, okay, you read the story of like who was Gavin Newsom with. And all of a sudden it came out that he was with a good friend of his named Jason Kinney. And you go, oh, who's Jason Kinney? And then you start to Google search him or you put him into followthemoney.org. And you find out that Jason Kinney is the top uh, oil and gas lobbyist in California. So for all of this stuff that Gavin Newsom talks about, how we have to close these refineries and we have to focus on climate change, and now he's just recently now he's throwing a temper tantrum over the fact that the Senate voted to overturn his 2035 gas car ban.
Yeah.
His one of his best buddies, who basically picked up the bill at French Laundry, is one of the top oil and gas lobbyists in California.
Oh
So it's interesting to see this dichotomy of how he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth, where he's
yeah.
railing against gas and oil. And we've done a whole show on this, or I'm sure we've done an episode on this, where there's plenty of oil in California. We could, if we wanted to, drill for oil here, create good paying jobs, help build the middle class. Also, maybe help the environment because we're not bringing oil from Saudi Arabia or Iran or Guatemala or wherever else we're bringing it from. So it is this interesting thing where you kind of have to like read between the tea leaves when you see these articles of like,
Right.
oh, who's this person named in the story? Okay, let me go
Mm,
down that rabbit hole and see who this person is.
yeah.
And Camille's very good at this, where she'll find a name in a story and go, okay, let me find out everything about this person. Let me go back through public records. Let me see what the Google search says. Let me see what
Yeah.
their campaign done. Like, let me dive into this person. And that's when you start to find out more information. You start to get a better idea of the whole story,
Yeah.
where you kind of have to put the detective hat on a little bit. Not every person is going to be guilty of some big conspiracy or something behind the scenes. Um, but that's sort of just classic, I guess, sleuthing journalism, where you see a lead and you go, who is this person? Let me vet
Hmm.
this person completely out and figure this out. And if there's nothing, there's nothing. But sometimes you'll find something and be like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is like a big deal and it's buried. Nobody wants you to really know about it.
Right.
Who is another good example of like the guy who was in charge or was appointed to be in charge of the rebuilding in LA, he was supposed to get a $500,000 salary for like 3 months of work.
God, that must be
And that's
so
what the
nice
For
mayor
cleanup.
promised him.
It was like, it had to do with cleanup, right?
Yeah, and I think he's like a big real estate developer, nonprofit real estate developer guy,
Yeah.
but also like buddy with the California Democrats and Karen Bass. Like, you go down this rabbit hole of like, who is this person? And that's
Yeah.
for your listeners who are curious about doing more of this. You have to have that hunger and that passion to turn over every rock, turn over every stone. So when you find an article that's really interesting, and you're like, this is an interesting story, where do I keep going? Start with the people. Start there. Start Google searching them. Look at followthemoney.org. Put their name in. See who they've donated to. That helps a lot. And you'll start to find a lot of information, and it's readily available. Stuff you can do in less than a half an hour now. I mean, it's all out there. People just have to look for it. So
I love that you
Yeah,
said less than half an hour, because in my head I was like, oh my God, that's like a week. Go ahead, Camille.
it can be. I mean, it really depends. There's been times where we have our episode planned and I'll start reading into we have a shared notes app and he'll like share an article on the subject or the person, and I'll start reading it, and then something will stick out to me and I start looking into that, and I'm like, so I know this is the story, but there's another story here. And I mean, that doesn't happen often, but
Yeah.
okay. So you mentioned a little bit ago, social media. Social media luckily has now been around for like 20 or something years. And so it's actually, most people are on social media. They've left a trail.
Yes.
And that does, not everybody, but that really does help, because you can go way back to things that they thought were buried, and you can find their old Twitter accounts and their abandoned Instagram accounts and even some Facebook things and, blogs, whatever. And people have a right to change. Certainly I'm not who I was 20 years ago, but when you start to see a pattern, that's when things like really start to click and you're like, okay, there's something going on here. But I also want to say, you don't have to do this to be involved and care about politics. Like,
Right.
we're very nerdy about this, and I think I'm not that I'm more nerdy than he is, but when it comes to the research side, I'm a little bit maybe crazy. And like most people would just be like, yeah, I'm going to go eat now and like watch a show. I'm over this. And I'm just like, I have to stop life. Like this is until I like figure out the end of this story. Is this person nefarious or not? And like, it'll consume me. And yes, that's weird. And I don't expect that of people. And so I do want to say to people who are like, politics is overwhelming and I don't want to do what you just said. I don't want to have to look into everybody like that. Who has time for that? Yeah, I agree. Start small. Like, politics affects you whether you want politics or not. It absolutely does. We have the primary elections prior to having our general elections, and most people will show up. Most people that vote will show up to the general election and say, how are these two candidates my only option? How did we get here? It's like, well, you ignore the primary. When and so many people sleep on the primary, and it's like, we had a whole poll, you had 10 options, and so just the top two with name recognition tend to get that, because most people will not show up to the primaries. And then you get to the general and you're like, wait, what happened to the other person? I like the other person. Nobody voted for them in the primary. You should have gone, get you and your friends. So, okay. I would just want to go back to like, if you want to start in politics, but you feel overwhelmed, you can literally just worry about like your city council. Just start there, and then from there you're going to learn. Like, you can start looking into your city council members. You go to the candidates, they're always speaking, and this is very small and local. They're going to have town halls. It's in your city, like it's 5 minutes from you. Go to some of these town halls, listen to what they have to say, ask them questions. And then when you get to go vote for them, you're like, oh, I remember that person. I liked so-and-so over this person. Okay. And just start there. Just that does have an effect on your life. It's not the sexy side of politics, but it's your local politics. It has a lot to do with, just things with that within your school district. Even you can care about that. You do have, what are they called? Our school district. I don't know because I'm not in the school stuff,
Oh,
but
it's
we,
like
you know,
the chancellors and the people that, well, maybe not chancellors, but superintendents. Do they get
there's
voted for?
there's like the local superintendents. There's
Yeah.
the school board,
The school,
basically.
yeah,
That's
school
yeah,
board.
the school board. And so if you have kids in school, like care about that because that's going to affect curriculum decisions, even um, so stuff like that. Just something that you care about.
Yeah, yeah.
Start there.
I
And then don't worry about everything. But then you will start to, as you start to notice little things and care about that, then it's going to get bigger. And you don't need to go down the rabbit hole of every single person, but do some searches, do some quick searches, if they're on your ballot, know who they are, and kind of like, don't just like, oh, they have an R or a D next to their name, which isn't going to happen with school board or city council. Or your county supervisors. But, sometimes the Democrat, sometimes the Republican, they're going to be the better person because someone's just going and filing and they're like, I'm going to be a Republican today to try to get their, like, maybe it's a more, red district that they're running in, but they're not really a Republican.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
so just do some, if they've been in office for a while, you can look up their voting record. Obviously that's not going to happen with smaller elections, but and then you vote for who you vote for. Someone wins, don't stress about your decision. We get to fire people by either recalling them or not reelecting them at the next election. You get to see the fruits of their labor and decide from there, do I want this person to continue in office? Are they making terrible decisions for all of us and we need to recall them? If it's something like your assembly member or congressional member, they're only in office for 2 years, and in 2 years you get to re-elect them or choose someone else.
I love that. That's really helpful to like break that part down, simplified. Okay, so let's dig into our current people who are running for governor for California. Who are they? What do we need to know? Because I feel like this is there's so many names that we've mentioned already. I think like Karen Bass is running, Bianco's running. Who else is running?
Karen Bass is running,
Karen,
or is she running for?
Is she?
So Katie Porter.
Katie Porter is running. I thought Carrie.
She's, I think, the top Democrat right now with the most name recognition. And she was in Congress for a few years. Then she ran for U.S. Senate against Adam Schiff. She lost. I think she came in third or fourth place. We don't know yet. We're going to find out soon, I guess. This summer, Kamala Harris is committed to making a decision one way or the other. Yeah. If she will be running for California governor. So I'm sure she would be the top Democrat name should that happen. Or I don't know. I mean, California did vote for her for president. She did win California in that sense. The top Republican candidates are Chad Bianco, who is the sheriff of Riverside County, and then Steve Hilton, who has not been in political office before. He had a show on Fox News. He's had a lot of big endorsements. Charlie Kirk of TPUSA, and then who was it? Jack Hibbs, who's a pastor of a church in Chino Hills, who kind of rose to fame during COVID because he refused to shut down. They've both endorsed Steve Hilton. Chad Bianco has been endorsed by several of our in-office assembly members, senators, etc. So because they both have been public, at least like Steve Hilton has a public profile of having been on a Fox News show. And so you can check his X/Twitter. You can, there's obviously even the shows that he's done. You can see a track record there. You can look at Chad Bianco's track record as sheriff and what he's done politically. He kind of rose to his own fame during COVID when he was not going to enforce lockdowns. He's like, we've got real crime. If somebody's out past curfew, I'm not doing that. There's been some controversy with him, which he's tried to explain, but believe whichever side you want to believe. Like, I'll just say the story just because
the big topic right now.
He took a knee Well, the story is that he took a knee with BLM. They were doing protests in Riverside County, and he had gone out, obviously, there to make sure that the protests don't get out of control and stuff. And then they all like bowed, they took a knee for something, and he kneeled with them. And so a lot of people were like, nope, you're out. You kneeled with BLM.
Yeah.
He says they told him we're kneeling for prayer. And so he thought he was kneeling for prayer. That's his side of the story. I wasn't there. I am not him. I don't know what happened. So it's, if you trust him, if you know him, or you trust his track record, you know, you're going to believe whichever side of the story you're going to believe.
Yeah.
And no one can really verify that for you. That's just something that you have to kind of do at your own risk, if you will.
Yeah.
Like,
There is a video that I did see that popped up. That's how I first found his name, and I was kind of like upset. But it was a condensed clip, and so someone sent. And I'm going to post it in the link of the video because I think people just can watch it and make their own determination on what happened. But in the video, he does say like, okay, let's kneel and pray. Let's pray over you. Like, let's pray together. And he knew, like, the guy knew him, and so it started like people started getting rowdy, and so they're like, okay, everybody take a knee. So they took a knee, and then they prayed, and then like they got up and like kind of like left, and it's a whole like 10-minute video. And so that what was clipped onto some of the reels that I saw was not that. It was the look how the sheriff bowed to us. So when I saw the video, I was like, oh yeah, this one really pissed me off in 2020. And then someone's like, watch the whole thing, and I was like, oh, that's a very different story. And we see that a lot, but also too, like, even in that clip, there might be something we can't hear or see or whatever. But I do, when I saw that, I was kind of like, okay, I see that. I think he might be telling the truth on that. But it is about like, it's public, so just look at it, you know. I think it's funny when, I think going back to Steve and his Twitter stuff, I know a lot of people are bringing some stuff up from 2022, and you had said, like, you know, we're allowed to change. How can we recognize if someone's just changing for political motives or if they're actually changing their standpoints on something?
that's a tough one.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really hard.
well, if
You're
if
welcome.
it seems, I would say if it seems convenient, like too convenient, that they all of a sudden just jumped
Mm-hmm.
in front of like what is popular, that raises a little bit of eyebrows for me. One of our favorite politicians we love to skewer, he's a good friend of the show, and by good friend I'm being completely sarcastic. Carl DeMaio, I remember back in 2016, he hated Donald Trump. Like, he thought Donald Trump was the biggest joke, and they must have scrubbed every piece of evidence of his radio show, because I remember tuning into his radio show every single day during the primary in 2015, 2016. Him saying, "Oh, Donald Trump's a joke. He's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's not a principled conservative like Ted Cruz. Like, there's no way he's going to win the primary." He hated Donald Trump. Now, fast forward, he pushes himself out there as, "I'm the Donald Trump of California." It's like, that's a radical change to be like, you hated Donald Trump, and now, albeit there's been a long time between 2016 and now. But those are examples of like, if you radically change your position and it just seems to be in line with what voters are saying,
Yeah.
then I kind of raise an eyebrow of like, kind of seems like you're doing this just because now all of a sudden you think this is popular. Um, I would actually respect a politician more if they were just like, hey, this is what I believe. I know I'm going to upset people, but at least I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest. Because there's
Like
so
a
many
lobbying.
politicians who just try to fit themselves into like, well, what this is what the demographic says, and political consultants will come out and be like, hey, a lot of people who are Trump supporters like you, so let's have your slogan be "Make California Golden Again" or something like that. And it's just like they're just doing it because it's a play part, like they're playing a role, and they're not really being out there being honest. So yeah, you'd have to look back at like what they've said previously, and is it a radical change, or is it kind of like, okay, I can see where you went from that to maybe a couple steps to the right or to the left on something. Another good example I'm thinking of nationally of like Tucker Carlson. Um,
Oh.
if you listen to his show, he says a lot, and I believe very genuinely
Mm-hmm.
that he was a big, proponent and pusher of the wars in the Middle East. And
Mm-hmm.
now he looks back on it, and he every time it comes up, he apologizes and says, "Look, I know what I did was wrong, and I was wrong." um, we as humans can figure out sort of whether people are genuine or not when they say
Yeah.
stuff. And I think Tucker Carlson feels genuine. He's had enough people on who've convinced him. Um, but when people just do a 180, that's when I kind of raise an eyebrow. I'm like, you didn't believe this 2 years ago, but now all of a sudden you believe it conveniently because you're
Yeah.
running for governor.
Yeah. And
Especially when they already are in office and they don't say like new information. I've changed my mind because of X, Y, and Z. When they just like flip it and hope that people don't notice, you're like,
hey, wait, I thought you said this.
exactly, exactly.
And I think we saw that a lot with like the COVID stuff too. Specifically with like the vaccines, is that there's a couple of politicians out there that have honed in on like, you need to get this, you need to get this, you need to get this, and like if you're not, you're hurting people. And then now they're like, I never said that, and people just like pulled up that Twitter account, they pulled up that Instagram post, and they're just like, yes you did. Like,
Absolutely.
and that's what I love about the internet. And it's so funny because I like two things. So Karen Bass is running for mayor again in LA, but they're not sure if she's going to win. Not governor. Wanted to correct that. But then the other thing, I had that moment where I was like, yeah, you literally can do that like to me. And I was like, when you guys said like, we investigate everybody, I was like, oh, is that what Phil's doing right now? He's looking me up. But I was like, but
Okay.
it's true. Like we can go back 20 years to my post. And it's one of those things that I'm like, it's not very good. Like some of the stuff I'm like, oh girl, why did you post that? Like,
Okay, but
Yeah.
also there's a big difference between being like a teenager and a young adult. And
being a grown
it's funny,
person.
I have this conversation with friends. I don't just research everybody. I actually don't. Um, politicians is different story, but
Yeah.
people like unless they really give me a reason to be like, wait a second, I'm actually suspicious of you. I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. That
Because
makes
again,
sense.
who has time for that anyway?
No.
And then I don't want to be like that. Like I don't want to mistrust every person I ever meet,
Yeah.
you know? And so I would have to have a reason to research them.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
otherwise I'm not. Like I'm going to take what you say at face value. I'm going to trust you until I don't.
Right.
And then maybe I'll start to, explore who are you really? But
No, you're like, wait
I
a
mean, you
minute.
could look back at like if you looked back 20 years at like my Facebook, because I don't use Facebook anymore. Who uses Facebook anymore? But if
right.
you look 20
I
years
do.
back on
Rude.
my Facebook, you would see all the posts about loving Barack Obama and stuff like that. And I say it on the show. I'm like, look, I'm not ashamed to say I voted for Barack Obama twice. It probably helped with my political evolution
Mm-hmm.
because I think he was a perfect example of like a Gavin Newsom who talks a good game, didn't deliver on
Yeah.
anything that he
Yeah.
promised. And that sort of pushed me in a different direction where I ended up frustrated with the system. But that's an example of like, hey, if you look back 20 years on me, I'm not the close to the same person I was back then when I thought, yeah, we should have the government run healthcare and we should have the government do this and the government should
Yeah.
provide all this stuff for us because the government is, so altruistic and good and they really
Right.
care about us. And now if
Yeah.
you listen to the show now, you know I am completely
You're like,
opposite of
no.
that now.
I think
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely
that's
black belt on
wild
it.
to me because that's how like I looked back at some of the stuff I was like voting for and what I stood for, and it wasn't until like because I was in poverty before and then foster care before in high school and all that stuff. It wasn't until I tried to start accessing those resources while I was raising my siblings or trying to get back on my feet that they're like, you have to drop from college and just do our plan versus be in college and get some support. You're not going to get that resource because here's the loophole of why you couldn't get this resource while raising your siblings. And it was like everyone around me is like, no, like Danisha, you should get this resource. You're doing all of these things. And then I was getting flagged for fraud because I had the same last name as my siblings before I was married. And I'm like, yeah, because we're siblings. Like this is logic here. And that's when it started to
right.
wake me up to like, oh, the government is not like here to see me get better. The government is not here to help me. I kind of have to figure this out myself. And then what was being praised was like someone who wasn't improving their life and being on low income housing. And that was what they were like, you can stay there, but if you move anything, like we made $100 more than what the low income housing requirement was. And they were like, you have to get out. We will not make an exception. And it was just like, I have kids and I make $100 more, which means next month I might not make that $100 more due to the overtime that I pulled. And it was just like, sorry, you have to figure it out. So it's like when I saw that and then started studying the psychology side and seeing some of the case studies of what the government had done to people, I was like, oh, they are not my friends. They are not my
Mm-mm.
friends at all. Like we were screwed. And that started making me look into things a little bit differently. And that's kind of been eye opening for me.
Yeah.
It's very sad. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm okay now, but I'm actually glad. I was telling my husband, we talk about this a lot where I say, I'm actually glad that those things happened because I wouldn't be who I am today, most emotionally, mentally, physically, or financially, because I had to make a decision. I had to just go. But some people will not do that. That they're just like, nope, I'm just gonna keep where I'm at, and then they're mad that 10 years from now they're still where they're at. And I'm like, you have the choices to make, and it's hard, but it's better in the long run if you take control of your life like that. And that is not a concept that people like to talk about because that's a whole different story. So let's dig into like what's some spicy information about our politics that are our governors running. Who are we voting for? Who are we avoiding? Let's talk about it.
Uh, well, it's always been a policy of mine in the show that we don't endorse anybody.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
Um,
no. Good.
but
That's a good
and
one.
the reason behind that is because we believe we do enough work that I think people get provided the information they need, or at least a starting point. And going back to earlier in the show when we were
Yeah,
talking about like, oh, you don't have to do a half an hour of research and put on your
yeah,
detective hat. There is a cheat code. You could just listen to our show and we'll tell you everything.
I love that.
That's longer than
So
half an hour, but yeah.
that's a little, yeah, but you can do that while like
Just a little.
driving or
Yeah,
you don't have to. Um, what's spicy in terms of coming up in the political race? Karen Bass, I think, probably has to get recalled.
yes,
She's absolutely destroyed LA, and I think it's only going to get worse. We seem to be covering a new story with LA like
yeah,
every single week. 2 weeks ago, we did a whole episode about how the CEO of the LAHSA, which is the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, um, they were completely incompetent, negligent. They want to spend taxpayer money on like an open bar at a holiday party. Um, and now they're deleting text messages. Karen Bass is deleting text messages and playing dumb about like, oh, I didn't know I had to keep a hold of my text messages during the wildfires. That's a new thing to me. It's like, Karen Bass, you've been in office since like before internet. Like, that you have to hold on to this stuff. Another point for your listeners, there's something called the California Public Records Act, where you can go and you can request information from government agencies. Like Camille and I both do it, and we'll put in these like records requests. You can ask for communications, you can ask for emails, you can ask for this stuff, you can ask for documents. It's all part of transparency. They may screw around with you a little bit and jerk you around, but you eventually get information from them about what's going on. One of them that we're doing right now is the insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, who loves to travel. He loves to travel and
It's
on
never in California.
taxpayer dollars. And he's never in California. He's in Bermuda. He's in these all nice resorts and stuff like that. And he says they're all for conferences. But LA, I think, is going to get really interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that's coming out about Karen Bass and how bad she's doing her job. The one thing I'm worried about with the governor's race, and I think, there's the looming threat that Kamala Harris might jump in around summertime.
yeah.
I That could be good and bad. I mean, it
Right,
could be she could run such a like disastrous campaign that it turns people away from the Democrats and maybe helps Republicans in California,
right,
helps us
right.
chip away at that supermajority. I'm worried that the next person to take after Gavin Newsom will be more statist and far left than he was, because he was at least trying to be like one eye on like Iowa in the Midwest, knowing like I'm going to run for president someday. What day that is, I know I got to take very
Right.
careful steps to carefully curate and groom my own political history, so I look just enough moderate for Iowa and New Hampshire and all these different
Right.
primary states.
Right.
So that's my concern, is that the next person after Gavin Newsom, we all don't like Gavin Newsom, we think he's done a horrible job, is going to be way worse. And if
Right.
there's a supermajority, taxes could probably go through the roof. They'll try and ram everything they could through this whole issue. Free healthcare to undocumented citizens that has broke Medi-Cal. That is a story that I'm surprised more people are not out like with pitchforks and knives, because this is unbelievable that literally a year after Gavin Newsom signed this to virtue signal about what a great person he is, Medi-Cal's broke. There's no other way to put it. Medi-Cal is absolutely broke. We're borrowing money from ourselves, from the general fund, to pay for the fact that we've been covering undocumented citizens for a year. And they want to continue this. California Democrats are now thinking about, well, let's propose a new tax so you guys can continue to pay for it. Like,
Yeah.
this is stuff that should get people really, really outraged.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a big issue coming up, because, well, actually, that's a perfect segue into like, this is going to be an issue going into the gubernatorial race.
Yeah.
Is, should California pay for the free healthcare under Medi-Cal for undocumented citizens? Will people on the left, are they going to take that position?
Right.
I don't know. Is Katie Porter going to take that position? I know Bianco and Hilton aren't going to take that position, but
Right.
what Democrats are going to take that position?
So one of the things that's really wild is that I got an email so I have a business here in California. That's, obviously. But they sent out an email saying that the unemployment, we like too much unemployment was given out for last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so businesses are having to pay more this year in unemployment. And they said, expect that hike to go up in 2026 as well. And so like as a business to run payroll, I'm paying so much more into this unemployment stuff. They're taking the money out of the accounts. Like there's going to be no money for unemployment and all of these other things because it doesn't exist. And people
Mm-hmm.
like, I think what was it? 12 million or $1 billion did Newsom say? What was the amount that he said that we're like in the hole, the deficit by?
12 billion.
$12
Yeah,
billion.
that's the deficit.
And it's like, how? Because
Right.
of these things, it's undocumented migrants on Medi-Cal, and people are saying that didn't happen. Newsom came out and said it did. Unemployment, people are being able to have there's so much unemployment fraud that's happened, and businesses are just getting hit over the head, and that's why so many businesses have left, and more are planning to leave. So it's wild to me that people are just like, yeah, we'll just see what happens, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we cannot do this. we need to be in.
Yeah, I don't know how any of us afford to live these days. I'm so serious. We're like paying taxes on taxes. It's just, we're not keeping any of the money that we're earning. And every time the government makes a mistake, they overpaid. They're like, well, now you guys are going to have to pay for it. And it's like, how about you pay for it? How about you work for free?
We didn't
To fix your mistake that you made. And so going back to the governors real quick, we mentioned the top three right now, which are Katie Porter, Steve Hilton, and Chad Bianco. Those are probably the three with the most name recognition. It is important to look at what they're promising or what they're running on that they can actually do. And I don't want to come in and tell anybody don't vote for Katie Porter. There's certainly people that love her, but her entire campaign so far is, I don't like Trump, therefore I'm running for governor. And she'll then, like, she did this, I mean, that's not what she says, but I'm paraphrasing. But she did this this phone call recently, like, my campaign is grassroots, and I'm going to call people that have donated $5 and $10 to me. And she does this video, and she's like, oh, hi, so-and-so, this is Katie Porter. Thank you so much for your donation. What issues concern you? And the person on the line says Social Security. And Katie's just like, oh, yeah, that's a really big one we need to tackle, or whatever she says. But a California governor cannot do anything about Social Security. So that's really something to pay attention to. If these candidates are running on whatever, and it sounds great, but do they have any authority over it if they even get in that position? That's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I know there's this like kind of battle between, well, Steve Hilton is pro-choice, he's pro-gay marriage, Chad Bianco's not. Okay, fine. Like I get that there's people that have a hard line there and they want to vote accordingly, and I'm not going to tell you not to, but keep in mind, abortion is enshrined in the California Constitution, and the only way that it's going to overturn that is if the people propose a proposition to literally undo that or reform it, if you will. And so it doesn't matter if Steve Hilton or Chad Bianco is our governor, because they can't just change that with a pen. That's either way, it's not happening. And so
For that issue, I haven't heard either of them say like, "Oh, we're gonna do this," but they've just given their stance on it. Did I hear, or have you guys heard anything else?
well, because they can't do anything, I think
Yeah, I don't think that either of them said like, "Oh, I'm gonna,"
yeah.
because they
And I
can't.
don't even think that so Chad Bianco has certainly come out and said, I'm pro-life.
Right, but
And
they wouldn't like
Steve
personal.
Hilton has shied away from it, but
Yeah,
his Twitter has been scrubbed, and he has been pro-choice for
right.
forever. And
Yeah,
so, do with that what you will. But I'm just saying, regardless of their personal stance on it, they can't come in as a governor and change that.
so that's a
Yeah.
whole separate issue.
It's
That
a whole
needs to
separate
be.
issue.
That makes
Yeah,
sense though.
that's a good way. That's another like red flag that I always catch on, and it's tough if you don't follow politics. It's tough to follow specifically what people are saying, and like
Hmm.
you'll have like federal candidates who talk about stuff that only the state can fix. Like I've seen people talk about they run for Congress and they're like, I'm going to get rid of the gas tax in California. I'm like, well, if you're doing it in DC, you're doing it in the wrong place. You're going to the wrong office,
Yeah.
first off. Or we've had politicians who are like, oh, I'm going to run for state legislature or state assembly and I'm going to build the border wall. It's like, not your jurisdiction. And those are like
Hmm.
good red flags of when you look at a politician to see if they're really honest or not.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of like what they can do, are
Or
they just,
competent, like know your office,
Yeah, that's that
yeah,
part. That part is huge.
yeah, if you don't know like specific, it kind of is a bad look if you don't know what the governor of California can and cannot do. It
Hmm.
shows you don't really know what you're running for. Um, we've said Katie Porter, I think it's just like she just wants to stay in the national spotlight and she wants to
I think
just
so.
maybe
Yeah.
run for Congress. I don't know, but she won't shut up about Trump. And it's like, our roads are falling apart and you are worried about Trump and Social Security. I think
Right.
going back to like the spicy issue that is going to continually develop in California,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be spending, and I think spending,
Yeah.
runaway spending, is absolutely going to shock a lot of people. To your story about how the government just fails to provide or doesn't do the services, I think people are going to start to go like, we pay into this because we believe we're going to get all this stuff.
Right.
And they just think, well, if we just keep raising tide, we'll just keep paying for it. I don't know how much longer that can go in California before there's a breaking point where Californians go, didn't we just pay this tax? Didn't we just do this?
Right.
And then for them to turn around and say, oh, our city like LA is $1 billion in debt, or it has $1 billion budget deficit. Another issue with Karen Bass. Same thing with San Francisco. San Francisco is about $1 billion budget deficit. San Diego's $300 million budget deficit. And it's just these promises on promises on promises of like free
Right.
stuff, free healthcare, free social services.
Right.
Um, and I think when people start to see like we're not getting what we're paying for,
Yeah.
I think people are going to get really pissed and they're going to
Yeah.
start saying, and especially with the cost of living right now in California, to turn around and tell people, well, we're going to tax you more, or we're going to add this fee on, or
Yeah.
something like that. And hearing that, oh, gas might go up to $8 a gallon because we had to close another refinery. Um,
Right.
I think that might be the breaking point when it starts to hit people's wallets. then people start to wake up and go like,
Yeah.
whoa, what's going on here? We need to get this all under control. Spending is
Yeah.
way out of control here in California.
I know so many people who have said, like, if the next person who comes in is not going to change it, like, they're gone because they're just like, I'm going to give it a year or 2 years because I can't,
Yeah.
our family can't afford it. And it's like they're working two jobs and they're making, I think both, like, I saw this report where it's like some counties in California is you have to make over $100,000, and that's not for a fine county. It's for like the bare minimum of a county, and that's been
Yeah.
driving me nuts because it's like I feel like we work so hard and it we're barely making a dent, and I'm like, how was I able to survive off of 35 $45,000 a year in 2015 when I had my siblings, and then today it's like I'm having to make $100,000 $200,000 as a business just to survive, and most of that's going towards taxes. And it's like, okay, well, we still have to cut back and we don't, and then it's just like, but if we went to a different state who had it together, we would not, we would be thriving, we would be rich.
Mm-hmm.
And not just
Yeah.
emotionally but financially, and then being like, oh, I trust that this, like, I, my vote matters, versus what I'm hearing a lot of people say, like, it doesn't even matter. And I've heard that statement since 2008. People have said my
Yeah.
vote doesn't even matter, and it's like, it does though. You need to go out and vote. So what would be one of the, like, a couple of the issues that the governor can handle? Because I think that, like, a lot of us don't know. I don't think a lot of us know, like, if a governor came in for California, what can they actually do, so we, as we're listening, know, is this person going to really do it or not?
Um, well, looking at it strategically, let's just say hypothetically, Kamala Harris runs against Bianco. Kamala Harris is a disaster, and Bianco or Hilton, let's just say either of those,
Mm-hmm.
squeak out a win because Kamala just doesn't know how to run a campaign. Number one is they could be the stopgap, or at least the block or the goalie against far leftist policies, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of they could veto every crazy law that comes up. Now, it doesn't. Could it go back to the legislature and they could override the veto? Yeah, but that requires a lot of work, and they don't want to do that. And
Yeah.
state legislatures make a lot of money to not do a lot of work besides propose ridiculous bills. Um,
Must be
so
nice.
that could be like step one. Like step one could be do nothing. Like don't propose, don't sign new bills. Like try and do as much as you can to stop crazy spending bills to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiate with the legislature on the budget. That's a big thing. The governor has to put out a
Yes.
budget, a proposed budget. We're seeing that right now with Newsom had to put out his May revisions before June 15th. So that's number one.
Yeah.
It's almost like, could it give Californians like a breath of like, okay, hold on. We're going to stop all the crazy bills. This isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Conversely, the huge state apparatus that California has built through executive agencies could be used to someone's benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be like the double-edged sword of they where they created this because they want to push a lot of their regulations and policies. But if someone got in who was against that as a governor, they could change a lot of the rules and regulations and policies and order a lot of these agencies to change things. Now,
Mm.
that gives them an enormous power to basically run the state as they want as an executive. Could they cut a lot of rules and regulations? Sure, they could do that. They could cut back on that. Maybe gut a lot of the administrative state here in California. Maybe they, grant more permits to open more oil refineries and stuff like that. I think
Mm.
they've created enough power in the governor's position. They could unilaterally make a lot of decisions. They could. What was the one I saw recently? Out of emergency powers, they could suspend CEQA just statewide and be like, we need to build housing. There's an emergency on housing. Let's suspend CEQA for a
Wow.
year or two and let like builders just build like crazy, build and create a lot more supply. So I think there's a lot of stuff they can do. Legislatively would be a little bit more tough,
Mm-hmm.
but they do have the power of the administrative state to get a lot of things done, or in the contrary, just not do anything and stop California from continuing to ruin itself.
Yeah. So can they, like, I know some of the I think Bianco has talked about education and homelessness. I think I heard Hilton also talk about, like, I feel like Hilton's campaign right now is just exposing how bad Newsom is, and I'm kind of like, we all know. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah. Thanks
thank
for
you
the update.
so much for being at the laundry,
Like,
Hilton. But
homelessness is out of control. Yes, right. I stumbled across their tent when I walked down the street.
I
Like
was
I
like,
know this.
that was 2020, bro. Obviously, we know that, there's, he's trying. I think he's trying to get his name out there and build rapport and stuff like that. But with homelessness and education, what would they actually be able to do to fix those? I mean, like, I guess Newsom snapped his fingers recently and was like, clean it up, and people started cleaning it up. But what else can they actually do to actually make a difference with those two things if they were to propose those things as governor?
Again, I think on homelessness, there's a lot of state agencies like Caltrans. Uh, that was sort of the whole issue was Caltrans was not cooperating with local cities, and they were saying, "Well, it's not our problem; it's Caltrans. That's Caltrans area." And then, okay, but the governor steps in and says, "Okay, Caltrans, you have to start cleaning it up." And we've noticed that actually there has been clean. I've noticed here in San
Yeah.
Diego on the highways and stuff, there Caltrans is going through and like actually cleaning up a lot of the highways and getting rid of a lot of the homeless encampments. Um, Maybe from a law enforcement standpoint of like enforcing loitering laws or something like that, sidewalk bans. There has been a ruling from the Supreme Court that you can ban homeless encampments from public parks, maybe taking a tougher stance on homelessness as well. I mean, first thing, if you were to get like a Bianco or a Hilton in there, is run an audit of where the hell did all that homeless money go? Like that would be
Yeah.
number one.
Some of
Get
that
in there and say
information's
like,
coming out.
yeah, just start telling us where did the money
Yeah.
go? Like, and
Yeah.
I think that's number one. And it's this agency that was created for the state. You have a lot of power over that. You could do a lot with that. Put the right people in place. Um, that's what I think you could do on homelessness is uh, get tough on punishment, which I don't want to get tough on punishment. I know a lot of these people are down on their luck. I think it's also, I don't want to go on a tangent here. I think we're always looking at the wrong problem or the root of the problem for homelessness. They always blame it on something else, right? They,
Yeah.
they don't they don't look at the root cause, which is what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
California is really, really unaffordable. Like it's
Yep.
really hard to live here.
Right.
Everybody is probably there are probably thousands, if not millions, of people in California who are one missed paycheck away from being homeless.
100%.
I think that's something we have to grapple with as a state and say, like, we can't have this many people who are on the cusp of homelessness every single month. And that's a bigger issue of like, well, why is it so damn unaffordable? Well, it's the regulations. It's the fact that your car registration costs $500 to $600. It's the fact that gas is unaffordable because we won't pump our own gas and we won't use the bounty that we have right under our feet. It becomes all these issues of like, if it's more affordable to live in a place and people can secure their financial well-being, you'll have less homelessness because there won't be so many people just ending up on the streets.
Right.
um,
Right.
so again, does that go back to the governor suspending CEQA to build more housing, to make housing more affordable? Does that go back to ordering them to grant more gas and oil permits to lower the cost of energy? Does the governor step in and start working with utility companies? Like these utility companies are out of control with what they charge. Personal story. We moved into this new house and we were trying to figure out why our electric bill was so high. We were like, $500 a month. It's just me and my wife and our French
Whoa.
bulldog, and she doesn't use electric. Like
Yep.
that's not her problem.
Yeah.
Um, and so we called up SDG&E and we're like, why is it so damn expensive for us? $500. We're not even here. Like we're not even here most of the day. Oh, well, we estimate it. You estimate it. You just pick a number out of your hat and go, that's what we're charging you. Like, how do these utility companies get away with this where they go, oh, well, your house is this big, you have this many bedrooms, we assume there's this many people living in your house and using electricity. How about you don't assume and just charge me for what I'm
What I
spending?
use. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that's
Wow.
something the governor could probably get involved in as well, as like really drop down on the California Public Utilities Commission, which is another agency run by the government and the state government, crack down on that too. Force them to
Right.
come to the negotiating table and say we got to fix this and we got to lower
Yeah.
cost of utilities. So
California
Yes.
has way too many agencies. Like I think
yeah,
Oh,
we have like 500 something agencies. Yes, we are a big state. Um, Regarding the homelessness, we did an episode, I want to say last year. You know, everyone it likes to say, "Oh, the homelessness because they're all drug addicts." They're like
it's not true.
that's true of some. You know, some mental health issues, yes. But we on the episode, what we were learning was that people are actually being priced out of their homes, and then eventually they're like couch hopping, and then eventually they're just kind of like, okay, now we live in our van. Um,
Yeah.
while they're going to their corporate job every day, you know, just trying to it's like it's crazy. And so yes, the this high it's not even just high, this like absurd cost of living here.
Yeah.
I mean, I my husband, he makes decent money. We were fortunate to have bought our home 9 years ago. Actually, it was like 9 years ago this month, and but it's our the second home we purchased. So we were able to 9 years ago buy this home when interest rates were low, and you know we got in. But I just so we live in Orange County, California, and there was just a report that came out this week, last week, that you need to earn 300 like 370 100,000. I just said that all wrong. I'm sorry, but like it's like absurd just to own a home in Orange County, and that's not even necessarily the nicer part of Orange
Right.
County, and it's not a big home. It's like if you want your little 2 bedroom tiny, you know, starter home, probably a fixer upper, you need to be earning 300 plus K a year to get there. And it like,
It's insane.
how do people like you said, if we were to move out of state, we'd be rich. Yes. If we sold our home now
And Lou,
and
yeah.
moved to like, I saw some home in it like on Instagram, and it was this cute older home that was, you know, all adorable and traditional. And it was in another state, and the price of it, I'm like, that's what we put down on our house.
I was like, wow.
And not even kidding. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I know people are going to say, well, then just move. Just move. No, my family's here. My
Yeah.
roots are here. I have my parents and 2 sisters right nearby, my kids' cousins. And we've, you know, my husband, like our lives are here.
Right.
And
Right.
sure, we could pick up and say, okay, now we can afford our nice big home, but we're surrounded by nobody we know. We don't have, you
Right.
know, you need your friends, you need your family, you need whatever your support system is. We would like we'd start over.
Yeah. And the big part of my story is I was actually homeless from 18 to 24. I bounced around 33 different places. I lived in my car for a full year, and I worked 2 part-time jobs and was in school. I always worked. I usually had like a third where it was like babysitting and things like that with people. But I was working, and people are like, you should have just been able to get off your butt and get it done. And everybody, like, I've shared this on social media, and there are so many comments that have come in where it's like, well, I did it. I went out and I got an apartment, and then I went out and I got a job, and I was like, okay, let's go to 2008. Let's go to the middle of a recession. So now
hmm
you're in the middle of a recession. To get an apartment, you have to have a job that is 2 to 3 times more than the apartment
Mhm.
costs. Now, you cannot have no renter's history. They want you to have a renter's history. If you don't have a credit report showing that you have a good credit, you cannot rent an apartment. It is your credit can get hit by not paying your credit card like 3 months in a row. You can lose hundreds of points without even realizing it. You're like, oh, I was late 3 times and that pushed my stuff down. That happens. And people don't realize just how easy it is, like you said, to get on the streets. So then when I had my siblings, I finally got a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment that was just 500 square feet, and it was $1,100 in 2015 for this small apartment. And then getting into a bigger house when I had all of them. We were there for 9 months with 6 of us once they came in, and we couldn't just afford anywhere else. And the big thing was like, well, you can't afford to actually pay this. I was like, literally I can, but it doesn't look like I would make that much. And looking back on it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I would have really struggled. But now, like, we bought a house. We went all the way up to Lake Elsinore to buy our first home, and then now we're in the Riverside County area. But we sold out there and then moved 4 years later because of that. So we bought right at the right time in 2020. We sold right in the right time of 2023, and then bought at the right time in 2023. But even then, things have skyrocketed up again.
Mhm.
So it's like, yeah, we had to prove that we could make, like, we make a lot of money to be able to be like, hey, and we're in Riverside County, which is not where, that's not where people are like, yeah, it's $1 million home, you know? So it's like, it just gets me. And I posted something about it where I was like, if it was hard for me in 2008, imagine being someone who's in the foster care system, pushed out at 18, 21 years old and said, go get this done. And that's where it, like, I've done a lot of the research on the foster care side, and they've said that they, once they surveyed the entire homeless population, 50% of those homeless population had experienced foster care at some point in their life.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
like, okay, that's a rooted issue. Then you get 18 to 21 and you don't have your social security card, your birth certificate, or a driver's license. Now you're running around trying to just do that just to get a job. It's not like it used to be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. People don't do it off of goodwill. You have to do this whole thing just to get a job. And I understand why. But it is that thing that so many people are like, oh, just move, just fix it, just do this. And it's like, it is not that easy. It took me a long time to get a good paying job. And then several degrees later to be like, okay, now I can start my own business doing what I do. But it is that, like, not because of my degrees, but because that's where my wheelhouse is where I, what I do. But it is that I always go back and talk with former foster youth, and they're just like, we can't afford here. We're going to be moving out of state. If it wasn't for getting housing tied to my education, I wouldn't have housing right now, which is great. But then it keeps you there longer, and you're afraid to make moves and to do things to help your life. But it's like, there's just so much more than it's not just like, oh, you're just homeless. There's the rooted, it really is rooted in, it's so stinking expensive here that, like, holding on to your apartment that's $2,000, $3,000 in a crap city, you're just like, I'm barely surviving. And it's like,
Mhm.
here, let's keep raising the minimum wage, let's keep raising the taxes. And I'm sitting back and I'm just like, y'all, this is very deadly. Like, we're just gonna leave.
Mhm.
So
And
it's hard.
not, sorry, I don't mean to sound
You're good.
like now insensitive to your story, but on that note, California is like we always say, so goes California, so goes the nation.
Yep.
We're almost this experiment state where they're like, let's try this and see how it goes. And then other, states will kind of, and so we could all start moving east, sure, but it's going to catch up with us. And
Yes,
so
we see
that's
that in
where
Arizona
we
and
have to fight
Colorado.
and where we have to be involved in politics and why it's important. Like,
Yeah,
does anybody really like politics? I don't know.
no,
It's just we have to
me too.
like it consumes it literally controls our lives. It runs our
Yeah,
lives, and so we have to be we have to take steps and be involved. And just moving east, into the Midwest, that we're going to get pushed out from both sides of the coast, and
yeah,
it
Yep.
everything, and then what? Nobody stayed and fought. Nobody cared, whatever. And now we're all just stuck, and that's how it is. And that, no, we don't want that. I have children. I don't want that for my children. I don't want that for my future grandchildren.
yeah,
Don't want
absolutely.
that for myself.
And we hear that from people from who moved to Arizona, Texas, Colorado. They're like, we left California because it was too expensive and we wanted cheaper. And then now they're experiencing the same stuff over there. And they're just like, what happened? And I'm like, because everyone just moved. They didn't change
Because
how they were
everyone
voting.
moved. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah, it
I want
catches
the
up with you.
cheaper, not the, I'm going to really dig into the thing that matters, which is the voting piece, and being like, okay, let me hear what the governor runners are saying. Like, I've heard the social security one, and I'm like, that's interesting. I thought the governor could touch that. Now I know. That's good to know. But I think that's what's wild. It's always a new thing you're learning, and I think that can be overwhelming. Do you guys have anything else you would like to add before we end? I think that's a good kind of wrap of where we've talked about, unless you guys want to add anything else.
Well, I'll wrap, but I did. There
Yeah.
was a point I wanted to touch upon with your story,
Yeah.
and goes back to the whole idea of homelessness and California being too damn expensive.
Mm,
My personal belief, and I don't know if this is scientific or not, but when you remove the barriers for people to get an opportunity, people can be more prosperous, right?
yep.
there are probably thousands of people who have a story like you who are trying to get off the street and trying to fix their lives, but there are way too many obstacles to get in the way.
Yeah.
And that is sort of always been my message about homelessness, is there are too many obstacles for people to live and thrive here in California. And we need to reduce all those obstacles to make it as easy as possible, because people want to thrive. People want to be prosperous. They want to enjoy a nice life. And we that's probably the biggest policy that people need to focus on in homelessness, is we need to remove a lot of those barriers, whether it's unaffordability or some sort of assistance or something like that.
Right.
All those things have to be removed. But to kind of wrap up about people who say, you mentioned people who say, like, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter," and that drives me nuts. That absolutely drives me nuts. It's my biggest pet peeve. It's the one thing that, like, I'll get DMs of, or people in the chat on the show will be like, my vote doesn't matter. It's all fraud. It's all illegal immigrants voting anyway, which that's a whole different thing. I don't want to bore people with my theory on why that's just such BS. Like, they do matter. And if you pay attention to local politics, the stuff that actually matters day to day, you'll see these races are very, very close.
Yeah.
A lot of these races are slim wins. And we people who just watch from the sidelines go, yeah, the Democrat won and this person won, and no big deal. But a lot of these are not blowouts.
Right.
One of my favorite stories is like Greg Wallace, who flipped a assembly seat out in the Palm Desert, Palm Springs area, won by like less than 100 votes.
Yeah.
And like that flipped the district. That's a big deal. Flipping any district or seat in the state assembly or the state legislature is a huge win.
Yeah.
School boards that I would say prior to 2020 and COVID, no one cared about. No one was like, school board is like for people who just, want to have a hobby or something like that. Then school boards after 2020 became hotbeds of like actual policy. And we're seeing that with like Sonia Shaw is probably the most notable person on the forefront of this, of like, this is local politics. We're going to start implementing ordinances. Huntington Beach just passed, a voter ID law, and they won in court. Like the California State, the Attorney General Rob Bonta sued Huntington Beach and said, this is illegal. You can't do this. And they won in court that said, yeah, Huntington Beach can control their own elections. And now you need to show ID when you actually go vote.
Wow.
Like, this is a big deal. So this stuff happens on this very, very local level. Yeah. And a lot of times it's people like, these positions are won by probably a couple hundred votes. These are, the numbers are not millions of votes. We're not talking about the governor or the president. They're very, very small margins. So if anything else, I know everybody gets into the big sexy things, who's running for president. And at the end of the day, president, I think, is less consequential to you than who's the mayor of your city.
Yeah.
I mean, if you live in LA, San Diego, or San Francisco, your mayor has a direct impact on your daily quality of life more than President Trump does 3,000 miles away, or your city council for that matter. Yeah. Who's in your city council? So my final message would be like, start with one election. Just start with one election. Start with one race that's important to you or local to you, or one proposition, and just learn about it.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, just learn about it, be informed, sit down and go, okay, I made an informed decision about this person for city council. And imagine you were about to be interrogated about your position, and you were able to say, I voted for this city council member because I like this position, this position, this position, or I voted against this proposition because it does X, Y, and Z, and I don't like these things. Yeah. That's basically it. If you do that, if more people did that, I think California would be a completely different state 100%. Than what it is today. So,
yeah, I agree.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Just what he said. I mean, I talked about, like, don't allow yourself to get so overwhelmed that you're like, I don't know all these things. Just start small. Yeah. We had our most recent city council race where there was, because you have like the districts within your city council, or at least how mine works. And there was two candidates that were neck and neck for the first few days after, whatever our voting date was, where they were still tallying all the votes. And it would be like, this person's ahead by 7 votes. This person's ahead by 1 vote. It kept switching. And then I think the final tally of those two was like, the margin was 26 votes.
Oh my
And,
God.
but city council members, they do propose these measures
Mm-hmm.
that which we all vote on. So pay attention to those measures are very important, because those are they can tax you. They can take over. If you have your local park that you love, maybe they want to turn that local park into high rise housing or something. Like those are important things. You take your kids to that park every week, and all of a sudden next month they're building condos on it, and you're like, what happened? Well, you missed the measure where that was voted in. And so yeah, that's why we have, not to plug our merch, but we do sell a shirt that says local elections matter.
I love
So,
that. Oh,
because
no way.
that's how we feel. We're
I'm gonna
just
get
like,
that shirt because it does. And
they
I've
do
been on
matter.
I've been on the receiving end of a lot of like sitting on the sidelines because I was just kind of like, it doesn't matter. And then I'm like, I can't do that. And it's so much more important at the local level for me, the mayor level, the governor level. That's direct impact. Yes, president stuff can impact at some point, but not drastically like people are thinking. And that's what's been eye opening to me is like, oh, California is the way it is because the times that I didn't sit on this and go vote and I didn't know about it. And what I have found is that you can actually subscribe to get the emails from the DMV and it'll tell you when the elections are
Right.
happening. So like there's no excuse, y'all. Like go out there and make a
Mm-hmm.
difference. But I do think it is something, it can be overwhelming, but I love that you guys have both said like take it little by little. You're not investigating every single person, but if you want to, go for it. But if you guys are so overwhelmed by it, also listen to the Underground podcast because like I hear the clips and I watch some of the reels and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna dig into that. And it's helped me in the last 5 years just really understand what's going on and why it mattered so much more to do the local election. And I know my foster care background, I usually am like, no conflict, don't get in conflict. And I'm like, this is something you have to get in conflict with. You have to allow yourself to dig into it because it does impact you when you're in your 30s. What I voted for in my 20s is still hitting us today. And that's
Mhm.
some of the things I'm like, oh, I thought that minimum wage was going to help me and it didn't. That was a big thing I didn't realize. I thought it was good that I was voting for improving our minimum wage, not realizing what it was actually doing. And in I think the roads in our Inland Empire area is kind of funny because it's literally been the last 15 years that they're still working on the roads that I voted for in like 2008. So
Right.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying,
It's like
y'all,
that gas
get
tax.
involved.
Wasn't the gas tax supposed to fix all our roads and
The
break
water
people down? Yeah.
storage, yeah, absolutely. No, ever so often it's like, hey, this new tax is hitting, January 1st. And people are like, I didn't vote for that. And you're like, you're right, you were a baby, but somebody else voted for that, 20 years
Talk to
ago.
your grandma.
And this was the
Yeah.
plan. So,
And that is, I think that's what's so wild is that we don't realize how long sometimes it takes to get into play. And so that's why it matters so much is to like, it doesn't matter if you're 18, it doesn't matter if you're 50, you should be going out there and voting to help make your California run the way you want it to. I was going to use the slogan and I was like, don't use the slogan. Just
Don't
make
use
it
the
run.
slogan. Make California golden again. Yeah.
Kill it again.
Um,
Like, I
one
love
one
the
one
phrases,
final
but
thought. Like
go ahead.
you don't have to vote for everything. I will
No,
say that
exactly.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
People feel like they get like they see a big ballot, it's 2 pages, and they're like, holy crap! Like all these people. You don't have to vote for everybody. Just throwing that out there. You can literally
Yeah.
vote for one thing, turn it back in, and that's it. So don't
Yeah.
feel overwhelmed like this is a test and you have to know every single position, everything. There's a lot of things I'll skip over and be like, I don't like either of these people. I'm going to
Yeah.
abstain my vote,
right.
or I
Yeah.
don't know what the hell this thing does, so I'm going to abstain
Just
my
not going
vote.
to vote
So
for it. Yeah.
yeah,
I like that
so
idea. That's actually empowering too, because I do feel pressure of like, I have to put something down and versus be like, no, I don't want to vote for either
no,
of them. And that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
yep,
But I know was it Philadelphia that just went through an election season and they were just like trying to push people out to vote. And it was literally like, they were just like, y'all, we missed the mark. Like people were not voting. And the person that like they're basically just going to keep going down the same path that they're going down, and they're just like, this is why local voting matters. And they saw a very
Mhm.
different turnout for the the national election with Trump versus local election, and they were just like, this is where it mattered the most, and people were just telling them like, no, it's fine, like it's okay. They're like, no. Okay, we have some work to do to teach people again. So thank you guys for joining me on. You guys please follow Buy the Shirt, local elections matter. I love that because it's so true. And then if you guys have questions, you guys can feel free to reach out to them. Watch the show. You will learn so much more. They break things down so beautifully. And sometimes we get some of the bigger drama pieces, I mentioned earlier, with like not just politicians, but people that they find interesting, and you hear things and you're like, oh, that's interesting. It's good to know who they can call out, and you really get to see a lot of the information. You guys present it very well. So if you guys can have questions, you can also leave them in the comments, but follow along and we'll go from there. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
Bye.